Hello everyone. Welcome back to the lecture series on British history or the history of England. With today's lecture, we are going to discuss the language and literature of early England. The language and literature of early England. The English language developed from the West Germanic dialects spoken by the Angles, Saxons and the Jutes. The English language developed from the West Germanic dialects spoken by the Angles, Saxons and the Jutes. As a language, Anglo-Saxon or Old English was very different from modern English. As a language, Anglo-Saxon or Old English was very different from modern English. The Anglo-Saxon invasion established the English language and the earliest English literature. The Anglo-Saxon invasion established the English language and the earliest English literature. The recording of that literature came with the return of Christianity to Britain. The recording of that literature came with the return of Christianity to Britain. By the year 700 AD, various tribes settled in different parts of Britain, each with its own dialect. By the year 700 AD, various tribes settled in different parts of Britain, each with its own dialect. The language generally known as Old English came primarily from the dialect of the West Saxons. The language generally known as Old English came primarily from the dialect of the West Saxons. The Anglo-Saxon had a rich tradition of oral literature. The Anglo-Saxons had a rich tradition of oral literature. One prominent writer of Old English period was Cynewulf. One prominent writer of Old English was Cynewulf. In around 600 to 700 AD, Venerable Bede wrote the work The Ecclesiastical History of the English People. In around 600 to 700 AD, Venerable Bede wrote the work The Ecclesiastical History of the English People. Poetry was the most used form in Old English literature. Poetry was the most used form in Old English literature. Most of the Old English poets are anonymous. Most of the Old English poets are anonymous. There were two types of poems in Old English, heroic Germanic and Christian poetry. There were two types of poems in Old English, heroic Germanic and Christian poetry. Some of the most famous Old English poets include the following: Caerman, Cynewulf, Alum, Venerable Bede, and Alfred the Great. Some of the most famous Old English poets include the following: Caerman, Cynewulf, Aldalum, Venerable Bede, and Alfred the Great. The Grave was the final poem written in Old English. The Grave was the final poem written in Old English. The Anglo-Saxons were fond of stories and they collected the stories as the work Beowulf. The Anglo-Saxons were fond of stories and they collected them as the work Beowulf. Beowulf is a collection of pagan tales and historical events. Beowulf is a collection of pagan tales and historical events. Beowulf contains more than 3,000 lines. The work Beowulf contains more than 3,000 lines. The first native English poet known by name is Caedmon. The first native English poet known by name is Caedmon. He wrote the poem titled Caedmon's Hymn. He wrote the poem titled Caedmon's Hymn. Another important poem in Old English is Judith. Another important poem in Old English is Judith. Another important poem is The Dream of the Rood. Another important poem in Old English period is The Dream of the Rood. There were four main manuscripts in Old English. They are the Caedmon manuscript, the Beowulf manuscript, the Vercelli manuscript, the Exeter book. There were four main manuscripts in Old English. They are the Caedmon manuscript, the Beowulf manuscript, the Vercelli manuscript, and the Exeter book. Some Old English elegies include the Ruin, the Wanderer, the Seafarer, the Wife's Lament, the Husband's Message, etc. Some Old English elegies include the Ruin, the Wanderer, the Seafarer, the Wife's Lament, and the Husband's Message. Old English had four dialects: Northumbrian, Mercian, West Saxon, and Kentish. Old English had four dialects: Northumbrian, Mercian, West Saxon, and Kentish. So that's all for today. We will meet again in the next class with some other topics.